Well, aside from the Epstein list that's going on in the current news media right now, we got a lot of news also regarding mixed martial arts. For one, Jon Jones seems to want to cop out of his potential matchup with none other than Tom Aspinall, saying that, you know what, I've already built a legacy, built a name, and I don't really need Tom Aspinall. Now, is he correct? Is he right? There is some truth to that. And the other aspect of that, sort of what is going on with Dustin Poirier, taking on a top contender in Benoit Saint-Denis, a French Special Forces soldier, probably one of the toughest upcoming 155ers right now, getting knockouts after knockouts, and on top of that, is knocking at the door of the top 5. And here comes Dustin Poirier, willing to give him a chance in ways that Jon Jones is not willing to give a chance to Tom Aspinall. Because you've guys seen all the tweets and all the social media interactions that is going on with Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall. Jon Jones tells Tom Aspinall, you're not the real champion. Well, the question is, how do you become the real champion when you have to fight the real champion and the real champion is not willing to fight you based on trying to save his legacy? And that's what Jon Jones is doing. Here comes Dustin Poirier. Has no care in the world about his legacy. In fact, he already feels that his legacy is intact. It's a little bit different. You see, Dustin Poirier did not end his career or is not in the career trajectory where he is undefeated. It's not like a Khabib, it's not like a Floyd Mayweather, and it's certainly not like a Jon Jones. So because of that, he's going to take risks in ways that the top names are not willing to do that. I think that kind of goes with Conor McGregor. Why they're sort of hesitant in putting him in a matchup with very reluctant in trying to put the event together based on the risks that they have to consider. How about the fact that he could possibly lose 3 in a row in his next matchup? He already lost twice to Dustin Poirier, and now putting him back in there, let's say with the likes of Michael Chandler, it's a risk. So they're going to be careful about how they're going to set up that matchup. Now, how about Ankalaev and Walker this particular weekend coming up? I watched the first fight from UFC 294. I gotta tell you, Walker is very, very vulnerable. He can get hit, he can get rocked. You've seen him take that body shot. He can be taken down by Ankalaev. Ankalaev seems to be the much better, well-rounded fighter. And I gotta tell you, they had their own little countdown show, which, by the way, is quite strange. Well, not strange, but it's quite good that they do that for fight nights. Usually they do this for pay-per-views, but yes, they have their own countdown show regarding their main event fight night this coming January 13th. By the way, on the same day that Arthur Beterbiev is boxing Callum Smith. That's a good one as well. So, how do I see this fight going for this particular weekend? I really see this as a clear win for Ankalaev. Now, in the first fight, there was an illegal knee, okay, which is very controversial. I got to tell you, I've been in experiences where I've been illegally hit in a fight, okay, in an MMA fight, and decided to get right back up and then fight again. Now, in this case, it wasn't that, right? It was the referee's discretion, and not only that, the doctor's discretion to say that Johnny Walker was not able to continue. But prior to that, everything that we thought and everything that we knew how this fight would be was playing out before our very eyes within just that one round. So I got to tell you that with Ankalaev, he's the much more well-rounded mixed martial arts fighter. There's no doubt about that from just those less than 5 minutes of action that we witnessed at UFC 294. If this fight was to go to a distance, you can rest assured that Ankalaev is going to win it. Based on the fact that he is the much more well-rounded fighter, he's got the better wrestling, And by the way, when I was watching that countdown show and I was trying to get to the tangent and the little rant that I was getting into it, Johnny Walker said that he's very angry and now he takes this fight very personal. Which, by the way, is very bad for somebody with his style. Why? If you notice, Johnny Walker is now training with Conor McGregor's team. Now, why is that important to understand? You notice his striking is very elusive and very creative. This is something Conor McGregor emphasized in his younger days when he had Ida Porto, the Israeli movement coach that he had back in the Jose Aldo days, which, by the way, is the reason why Conor McGregor looks very elusive the way that he did early in his career, during the Chad Mendez days, during the Jose Aldo days, during the days when he fought Marlon Brando, and the days that when he fought, what is that guy's name? Dennis Seaver, the Russian that he called the Nazi, but just like most tweets of Conor McGregor, he goes and erases it. Nonetheless, what we got going on here with Ankalaev and Johnny Walker is basically the continuation of the Dagestani style taken on Team SBG Ireland. Which, by the way, these two teams, I gotta tell you, are very prominent in the world amateur scene, especially with John Kavanagh and his job that he does with taking on the amateur mixed martial arts national team of Ireland, where he takes them to Bahrain and these competitions. So you got to understand, they are growing into a very technical team that is gathering all this data from all these fights and all these different levels that they are putting their athletes in. And now they're going to use that to implement a game plan for Johnny Walker, in which they need to, because a guy like Ankalaev, he loves to strike, surprisingly enough, right? Now, why is that significant to understand that he likes to strike? Because you would think that when you're in a fight with a guy like this, you're going to be in a striking match. But in reality, he can wrestle you as well. He can clinch you. Oh, and by the way, in that same video that I saw in the countdown of their fight, I also had noticed that he was training with Sean Strickland, which, by the way, is very important for Ankalaev before he gets a title shot. You got to know what it's like to be in there with a champion, somebody who's been in there 5 rounds with some of the best guys in the world, including the fact that, well, Sean Strickland has trained with the likes of Francis Ngannou. So he's a wealth of knowledge to learn from. And the fact that Ankalaev trained with him for this fight and the previous fight where they had originally been scheduled, but because of the lackluster doctor stoppage and a no contest, well, here we are. So I think that Johnny Walker is going to come forward in ways that he's never came forward before, because he's taken this fight very personal. He's going to get countered. Not only is he going to get countered, he's going to have his chin down, which, by the way, he has a very bad habit of. And unfortunately, training with somebody like SBG Ireland and John Kavanagh doesn't really help that. Now, John Kavanagh is the first black belt that the country of Ireland has ever got in the sport of BJJ. Not only that, he is a double champion coach with Conor McGregor, but never really became a champion coach with anybody else, which is important to know, because you got to think, how is that particular experience he has taken on a 145 and a 155 champion going to translate in the 205 division? And so far, we've seen some positive results with Johnny Walker, by the way, with favorable matchups. But with this particular matchup, we don't know how favorable this is going to be for Johnny Walker. So my official prediction for the Johnny Walker and the Ankalaev fight, and you can call me biased if you like, but I'm just speaking from a technical point of view, and I could be wrong. Johnny Walker could easily sleep Ankalaev at any time, just like anybody can easily sleep anybody at any given time. But still, if this fight goes to 5 rounds, it's going to go to Ankalaev based on the technicalities that I had just mentioned, based on the fact that he can wrestle you anytime, based on the reason that he is an evolving striker, likes to use it in the majority of his fights, and has had quite a few successes at it. Front kicks, jabs, and on top of that, how about the leg kicks that Johnny Walker's implemented in the first fight that they had together? Will he be prepared for that? Yes, because quite frankly, in the first fight that they had at UFC 294, the only threat that Johnny Walker really presented were the leg kicks. Not so much of his height, because Ankalaev is elusive enough. Not so much of the wrestling, because if he wants to, he can be the much more superior wrestler in these exchanges, in the clinches, in the ground. On top of that, perhaps maybe even hold Johnny Walker down if he needs to. And if there is a finish, it's still going to go to Ankalaev, because guess what? He has the counter shot to measure him in the right places. So, Ankalaev, either by decision or by finish. More than likely, I'm going to go with a submission maybe in the third round. Let's go with a really juicy position on that one. Third round submission. That's my official prediction for that. So now going back to Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall. And by the way, shout outs to Benoit Saint Denis, but more importantly, shout outs to Dustin Poirier for giving him an opportunity that most fighters in his position would not give him. And why I need to start out with that is because we got to look at Jon Jones and his choice. Now, is this the right choice for Jon Jones to do? I got to tell you, yes. From a humanistic point of view, because you got to understand, we got to look at this from two lenses. From a humanistic point of view, and the other from a super fan and the competitive integrity of the sport. As a fan of the sport and as somebody that appreciates competitive integrity, you're not going to love this. You're not going to love Jon Jones just leaving and allowing this particular division to have a paper champion, in which it already has with Francis Ngannou as a lineal champion, leaving, going into boxing, and perhaps maybe never even leaving boxing because his PFL deal allows him to box. But the problem with that is that he is assigned mixed martial arts fighter to a mixed martial arts company, with unfortunately a mixed martial arts company that doesn't have the competition with the likes of Tom Aspinall or even Jon Jones. So he doesn't have any juicy matchups to go to. In boxing, he does. Obviously, there's Tyson Fury now, Anthony Joshua, so on and so forth. But with Jon Jones, from a humanistic point of view, I agree with it. Not so much from a fan perspective, not so much from the competitive architecture or competitive integrity as I kept going on about. But as a human, this is what you have to do to preserve yourself. You can't stay in too long. Jon Jones is starting to realize his mortality within the sport. Not so much of the mortality within outside of the sport, but I mean within the sport. Within the sport, he's starting to realize that there are guys out there that are going to present to me problems. And can you blame him? He's starting to look slower. It's not helping that as a heavyweight, guess what? You're going to be a lot slower. Why didn't Jon Jones just come in here with being the normal Jon Jones that he already has been, the lean, lightweight, heavyweight champion Jon Jones, used to beat up heavyweights at the gym with the likes of Alistair Overeem, Brendan Schaub, Travis Brown. Who else was in Greg Jackson's MMA in Mexico, in New Mexico? A lot of top heavyweights. Frank Mir, he beats up a lot of top heavyweights while he was a light heavyweight. So why did he need to gain weight? Maybe we saw what happened in the Cyril Gane fight. Maybe this is the reason why he was able to take him down so easily. Having the right size to do so. The striking department, perhaps he was tearing these guys up. But he needed a little bit of an edge in the wrestling department. However, there was diminishing returns that came with that, which is exactly what? The fact that he got a little bit slower. And not only that, I think that it affects his matchup with somebody like Tom Aspinall, who, by the way, historically has moved like Dominic Reyes, has moved like Alexander Gustafsson, the two fights that Jon Jones has had the biggest problems in. Oh, and by the way, all these men that I had mentioned, Gustafsson, Reyes, and Tom Aspinall, are all 6'4", 6'5", basically the same height as Jon Jones. And this right here gives Jon Jones serious problems. So you can't blame Jon Jones for doing this, for saying that he's going to back out and say that, you know what, I'm here and I've conquered, I've beaten everybody, and here's Tom Aspinall, who just turned 30, and you can't expect me to go out and fight him. It's just like what George St. Pierre said, the best of all time, the greatest of all time, the GOAT of MMA. What did he say? He said, man, there will always be another guy. You beat one guy, there's always going to be someone else. You got to know when to stop. He knew exactly when to stop. He had a hard fight against Johnny Hendricks, left the division, left the entire industry, vacated the belt, and then came back to fight an easier champion in Michael Bisping. Once in a while, you come across these champions that are a great matchup for you. And here he is, a champion at a higher weight class. By the way, one of the criticisms that he got, never moved up, so he decided to go and move up and win the belt. Well, Jon Jones, he had the same criticism. A guy who never moved up, all of a sudden moved up, and now decides to leave because guess what? It is the right time to do so. So I'm going to leave it off with this. We've talked about it with Tony Ferguson. We've talked about it when I covered the fight for Amanda Nunes in her retirement fight back in UFC 289 in Vancouver. We talked about it during the Robbie Lawler days, because guess how Robbie Lawler went out? He went out with a knockout, which was great, right? Had he won that fight and kept on going, what would have happened? Eventually, he would run across somebody that would sleep him. It's a numbers game. Eventually, somebody is going to go and sleep you. So you got to pick your choice, you got to pick your timing, and you got to pick your shots. Just like what you do in the fights, and just like what you do when you pick the fights. Now, I understand that in the fan side of it all, the bloodthirsty fans, they're going to look at it and say, you know what? This is cowardice of this fighter to do that. Is it? Is it cowardice of Jon Jones to take a short notice fight against Shogun Rua back in 2011, against Rampage, against Thiago Santos? The names and the list goes on and on with the people that he's beaten. I can't even fathom all the names that he's beaten. It's just a list of killers after killers. Now, the other rebuttal of that is they'll say, well, you know what? He fought guys that could easily make 185. Yeah, but guess what? Anybody can make any weight that they want as long as they get into the right diet within reasonable courses, of course, because obviously somebody like Shogun could never meet 155. Somebody like Lyoto could never meet 170. Yes, Lyoto did go to 85. Thiago was an 85 fighter and then moved up to light heavyweight. And the bottom line is, you're always going to have criticisms with the names. The same thing with Khabib. There's always criticisms with everything that you do. But make no mistake, this is something that fans have to understand. For those that are constantly criticizing the athletes for their choices, the fact that they know their own upper bound limits and may not necessarily admit it to the world because it's not the most macho thing to do. You have to understand that this is what these athletes have to do in order to preserve themselves for their upcoming life beyond the cage. A life that basically gives them a healthy outlook. Okay, they don't have a CTE. They don't have these short fuses that's going to end up, that's going to put them in jail because, let's say, they have some neurons loose in their brain because they got hit too many times. or the accumulation of damage that they shouldn't have been taken. Either way, guys, like and subscribe. I hope I've given you guys the breakdowns of all these important news and factors that involve the career of Jon Jones and where he decides to take it. So, like and subscribe. Don't forget to share. Tell a friend to tell a friend. And watch till the end. Thank you. We're going to leave it off at 2024.